My parents sold me to get revenge. My name is Gina. If just a couple of years ago I was told that people can be so easily and simply taken and sold, I would not have believed it, especially when it came to children. I have always believed that parents and children have a special bond, where there is no benefit, no evil, where there is only sincerity and faith. But my parents let me down. I'll tell you more about it. Gina, are you awake? Hurry up for breakfast or you'll be late for school. Well, have you heard anything about the money? Uncle Ted asked. No, Ted, my sister hasn't been in touch for 2 months. I don't know what happened there with her husband, but their daughter, whom we support, also makes me quite tired. Rena replied. It used to be good, Ted said. Her parents sent us money for her and we lived on it. You know I can't find a job. I know. Ted, you've been sitting at home with me for 4 years. We're lucky that my sister is stupid enough to send us so much money. Others would not believe that it takes so much for a child. Thank you, Auntie. Your signature pancakes are as good as ever. Have you heard from Mom and Dad? Not yet, honey, but I know it's okay. My heart feels it. If she calls you, do you know what to say? Of course, Auntie. I remember that I need money for my maintenance and quickly. That's a good girl. Now run to school. You're so good at leading a child by the nose. What you can't do for money. It's easier for me to convince her that I love her than to find a job. Ran to the school bus, got on, said hello to everyone, and put on headphones. My parents left for work almost 3 years ago. It was our first such long breakup. They couldn't take me with them because the jobs they were getting took 99% of their time. They both worked for the same big corporation, and they made good money. But we paid the biggest expense by not seeing each other. To avoid risking me, they decided to entrust me to my beloved Aunt Rena and her unemployed husband, Ted. They have no children, and they never wanted them. They like to drink, often swear, but then make up. My parents send the money. Exactly 5 times more than they really need. They thought I didn't understand. I understood everything, and so did my parents. It's just that the money was my guarantee that they wouldn't touch me, and they will be treated as expected. Hi, Gina, how are you? How are your parents? Hi, there's no news. I'm beginning to think they've run away from me. Come on, it's not my mom who ran away from the hospital. What I love about you, Elin, is that you always find something to calm me down. How can you do that? She's just a kid. She doesn't deserve this. Is that why you didn't call? Okay, let me adopt her. Stop it, Lisa, you can't. I said no. Suddenly, my aunt hung up the phone, and I realized that she was talking to my mother. I ran up and started asking who called, but my aunt was crying, and she wouldn't calm down. I took her hands and we sat down on the sofa. And my aunt told me that my mother and father had decided to sell me to some people because they couldn't support me anymore. Is this a joke or something? I'm sorry, honey. I scolded her, begged her not to, but she said if I disobeyed her, they would kill Ted. That can't be right. Why didn't she talk to me? Because I didn't want her to. She didn't want to talk to me either, so she told me to say goodbye to you. I told her I wanted to adopt you, that I didn't need the money, but she wouldn't listen, and she said again that Ted was finished, and that was it. I was in shock. I never would have thought that my parents would betray me like this. I lived in a strange family for a whole week, and during that time, I didn't say a word. I don't know why they needed me, probably to work and look after their children, because there were 6 of them in that family. The week seemed endless. At some point, I thought that maybe they were all making it up, that no one really gave up on me. I wanted so much to believe that it was true. My new foster parents didn't want to let me go to school. You're not going anywhere. Why do you need an education? You already have a job. You'll work for me. If you don't let me study, I'll run away, and I will try to escape every day until I do. I had to learn, and they let me, or I would have run away. And the day I walked into the classroom, my mom was waiting for me. She threw herself at me, hugged me, kissed me, but I didn't move. I was so angry, so upset. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Did you finally come to say goodbye yourself?" "What? What are you talking about, honey? I called you for 3 months in a row, but no one answered. It wasn't easy to get away. Dad is still there, but I came to take you with me." "With you? Are you kidding me? You told them to sell me." "What? Sell you? Who told you that?" "Gina, you have to tell me everything." The story ends with my aunt and uncle being arrested. They cheated me out of money, didn't pick up the phone from my parents, and didn't respond to messages. They turned out to be even bigger crooks. Well, my mother took me with her. Now I live with my parents, as it should be. I realized that I was wrong about them. Your real family will never betray you. Tell me, did you guys like my story? Tell me, what are your parents like? I recently thought about my own because I grew up in a foster family, which is very happy. Why? I'll tell you now. My name is Audrey, and I was born in a small village in France. My parents were poor. My mother stayed at home because of me, and my father worked as much as he could and where he could. I remember how often they quarreled over money. My mother wasn't happy that they were not rich, and my father wasn't happy that the house was a mess and there was nothing to eat. Somehow, everything was interconnected. Because of non-payment of taxes, there was no water at home. And if there was no water, then what kind of cleaning was there? So my mother said. And so every day, every time, they found a reason to fight. My parents swore amongst themselves, and at the same time forgot about one detail: me. As a result of the conflicts, I learned to be invisible. And when I grew up a little, I found a place where I could hide from everyone, be alone with myself. I believed that one day I would be fine, but I didn't know how yet. I never thought I'd have to do more than leave. And then one day, when my father once again lost his job, there was hunger in the house. We ate all the supplies, there was no one to ask for help, so the three of us were going through a difficult time. Once I asked my mother if it was always going to be like this, but she said no. According to her, they married for love, and then things went downhill. Dad used to have a firm, but his partner set him up with a business, took the business, and left the debts to Dad. Because of them, they had to sell a lot, give away a lot, and this small house was left by my mother's mother as a legacy. That's all that was left. Because of the Great Depression and a series of failures, my parents gave up. I still remember that terrible feeling of hunger. We could not eat for weeks. There was no work at all. My mother even went begging, and sometimes managed to bring home food. Then they decided to sell the house, and we stayed in a barn nearby. The proceeds from it helped us to survive for some time, but my father, instead of finding a job, began to drink. Then my mother joined him. I thought that hunger was the worst thing in the world, but I was so wrong. It turns out that even worse than hunger is drunk parents. So we stayed outside. Then I couldn't stand it and went to find a job myself. I found one in a nearby village. At first, the family I worked for as a cleaner had a lot of questions, and I didn't tell them that my parents were drunks. I just said that I only have my mother and she is ill, so I have to work for a living. The hostess felt sorry. They not only paid me money, but also fed me, and sometimes I got clothes from them, worn, but good. It seemed that everything was more or less better. As soon as I thought about it, my father followed me one of these days. When he came out of a binge for a couple of days, he asked where I was getting the food. He had little faith in my honest earnings and thought I was doing worse things than drinking. So he followed me, broke into someone else's house, and even in this form began to talk nonsense about the fact that those people were so bad that they take advantage of my stupidity. When the hostess clarified the situation, he stood silent and did not know what to say. And then he blurted out, "Give me a bag of potatoes instead of Audrey." Can you imagine my reaction? I just didn't know how to react or what to say. Tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't believe my own father would do something so mean. Are they ready to get rid of me just like that? What have I done? Why don't they like me? This was the strongest blow for me. because the feeling of loneliness is the worst in the world." The lady looked at him and asked him a few more questions, and my father explained that he and my mother had nothing to eat and nothing to provide for the child. "You'll be better off here. You are better than us," he said. Despite the hurt, I didn't ask him to change his mind or try to run after him. Instead, I ran to my hiding place and let my emotions run wild. I screamed so loud that even the spiders were scared. I guess the owner found me by my voice. Her name was Aunt Iris. Emphasis on the first I. She reassured me, said that she was very sorry, and asked me not to leave them and not to hold a grudge against my father. It was hard to do, all of it. But at some point, I realized that she had nothing to do with it. I calmed down and went home with her. On the way, I asked her if she agreed, and she said yes. "My father sold me into slavery," I said, but she interrupted me, suddenly hugged me, and said that she would only be happy to have a daughter like me. I was very surprised because I was a complete stranger to them, and Iris asked if I would mind if she tried to be my guardian. I didn't have a choice anyway, so I agreed. And from that moment on, my life changed for the better. That evening, she introduced me to her husband and 2 children, a daughter and a son, and they greeted me warmly. We actually already knew each other, but now I was a different status. Her husband, Uncle Tom, hugged me and invited me to dinner. It had been a long time since I'd eaten such delicious food. They lived well, but I was not impudent, did housework, was polite, for which I was very well treated by everyone. My foster family was 100 times more kind and more forgiving. I felt really happy there. I was given a room, my aunt washed me in the bathroom, cut my hair, braided it, put on a new clean dress, and the children gave me a couple of toys. Even though I was older than them, they said they liked me for a long time. I was grateful for everything. The sediment was still there, but I was recovering quickly thanks to their good attitude. I was just lucky that it happened like this. A month later, I was sent to school. I already forgot about my past life, like a terrible dream. But this dream did not think to let me go just like that. When I came home from school, Aunt Iris was standing on the doorstep. She was loudly arguing with someone. It was my mother. It turns out that a month later, she came for me, realizing that they had made a mistake. I didn't want to go back, and my aunt didn't want to let me go, but my mother threatened to go to the police. She promised to go to the police and accuse the new family of kidnapping her child, because I hadn't been adopted yet. On pain of harming my aunt, I shouted that I would not go home with her. I was shattered. I didn't want to go back to the barn. All the way home, my mother swore they were done with alcohol, but they weren't. They realized that I brought them a steady income. They didn't want to work anymore, but they didn't stop drinking. My father told me to get a job again. I knew it. My life had become worse than it was with them before I left. They demanded money every day, and I worked harder and barely slept. And at the moment when I had almost no strength left, I ran back to my place and saw Aunt Iris there. My mother forbade us to meet, so she came there every day and waited for me. When I saw her, I cried a lot. I wanted so much to go to them again. Aunt Iris came up with a plan to save me, and I listened to her and agreed. I came home late that night. My parents were furious. They started asking about the money from the doorway, and I threw everything I had at them. My father said, "Is that all? You worked all day and only earned 5 euros? Are you kidding me? Where is the rest of the money?" he shouted. I told him it was all I had, but he didn't believe me. Then my mother came and searched my pockets, and I told them that they had no right to do this to me. But Dad said he would do what he wanted, because I was their legitimate daughter. "You sold me for a bag of potatoes. You make me work so that I can bring you money for alcohol," I shouted. But they just laughed and then said it would always be like this. And Iris burst through the door with Uncle Tom and the police. Yes, we did it. These are at least 3 crimes: the sale of a minor, the exploitation of child labor, the lack of living conditions for a child. After that, they were taken to the police station. There were a lot of legal proceedings. My parents spent all their time trying to keep me from being officially adopted. It was a matter of principle. Then, our lawyer went to the trick and made sure that they were deprived of their parental rights. I knew I wouldn't see them again from then on, But I didn't need to. Life is kind. It gave me a second chance, and I couldn't help but take it. My foster family still treated me warmly. I continue to attend school. My aunt goes to all the meetings. I share my secrets with my new mother. Sometimes, when we want to chat, we go to my spot and have a picnic under the shade of a spreading tree. You know, there is an incredibly beautiful sunset there. It's great that I'm not the only one watching it now. What would you do in my place?